The universe doesn't want you. This is not metaphor. This is not poetry. This is the cold, mathematical reality of existence beyond our pale blue dot. The cosmos is not a frontier waiting to be settled. It is not an ocean waiting to be crossed. It is a void of such absolute hostility that the very concept of human survival within it borders on the absurd. I have spent my entire life in love with space. I have gazed at distant galaxies through telescopes. I have worked on missions that sent our robot emissaries to other worlds. I have written books celebrating the grandeur of the cosmos and humanity's place within it. And I can tell you, with the full weight of that love and that knowledge, that colonizing space may be the most impossible thing our species has ever contemplated. We speak of space as if it were a place. It is not a place. It is the absence of place. It is emptiness on a scale that the human mind cannot truly comprehend. Between the stars lies nothing, not thin air, not trace gases. Nothing, a vacuum so perfect that a single breath of air released into it would expand forever. Each molecule drifting apart from every other until they were separated by distances greater than the diameter of Earth. This is what we propose to cross. This is what we propose to live in. This is what we imagine we can somehow make our home. Let me tell you why we cannot. The first thing you must understand is distance. Not distance as you experience it on Earth, where the far side of the planet is a day's flight away, where the most remote locations can be reached in weeks. Distance as it exists in space, where light itself, the fastest thing in the universe, crawls like a glacier across the cosmic void. The moon is close, absurdly close by cosmic standards. Light reaches it in about 1¼ seconds. We have been there. We walked on it. It took 3 days. Mars is farther. Light takes between 3 and 24 minutes to reach it, depending on where Earth and Mars are in their orbits. We have sent robots. Humans could reach it in perhaps 7 months with current technology. We have not gone, but we speak of going. It seems within reach. Now let me tell you about the stars. The nearest star system to our own is Alpha Centauri, a triple star system about 4.37 light years away. Light years. Light, traveling at 299,792 kilometers per second, takes 4.37 years to get there. That's about 41 trillion kilometers. Written out, that's 41 trillion kilometers. How long would it take a spacecraft to cross that distance? The fastest object humanity has ever built is the Parker Solar Probe, which achieves speeds of about 700,000 kilometers per hour as it swings close to the Sunday. At that speed, reaching Alpha Centauri would take approximately 6,300 years. 6,300 years. That is longer than recorded human history. The pyramids of Egypt were built about 4,500 years ago. We would need to travel for longer than the entire span of human civilization to reach the nearest star, and Alpha Centauri is close. It is our next-door neighbor in a galaxy of 200 billion stars. Most stars in the Milky Way are tens of thousands of light years away. The galaxy itself is 100,000 light years across. The nearest large galaxy, Andromeda, is 2.5 million light years distant. The numbers become meaningless. The human mind evolved to understand distances measured in footsteps and days of walking. We can intellectually grasp that a light year is about 9.46 trillion kilometers, but we cannot feel it. We cannot truly comprehend what it means to be separated from everything by such vast expanses of nothing. But let me try to make it real. Imagine Earth as a marble about 1 centimeter in diameter. At this scale, the moon would be a small bead about 30 centimeters away. Mars, at its closest approach, would be about 55 meters distant. The sun would be a ball about 1 meter across, sitting 117 meters away. At this scale, where Earth is a marble you could hold between your fingers, how far away is Alpha Centauri? About 31,000 kilometers. That's approximately the circumference of the Earth. To travel from your marble Earth to the nearest star scaled down to something you could almost comprehend, you would have to walk around the entire planet. This is why interstellar travel seems impossible. Not because we lack imagination, not because we lack will, but because the universe is built on a scale that dwarfs every human concept of distance and time. Now let me tell you about energy, because distance is only half the problem. To move through space, you need propulsion. To propel a spacecraft, you need energy. The faster you want to go, the more energy you need, and the relationship is not linear. It follows the cruel mathematics of the rocket equation. Every kilogram of fuel you carry must itself be accelerated. To carry more fuel, you need more fuel to carry the fuel. The numbers spiral exponentially. To reach even a fraction of the speed of light using chemical rockets, you would need a fuel tank larger than the observable universe. I am not exaggerating. The mathematics have been worked out. Chemical propulsion, the kind that took us to the moon, is fundamentally incapable of interstellar travel. The energy density is too low. The mass ratios are impossible. What about nuclear propulsion? Better, much better. Nuclear reactions release millions of times more energy per kilogram than chemical reactions. Project Orion, proposed in the 1,950 seconds, imagined a spacecraft propelled by nuclear bombs exploding behind it. The concept was technically feasible. A spacecraft could potentially reach 5 to 10% of the speed of light using nuclear pulse propulsion. At 10% of light speed, Alpha Centauri is still 44 years away. A human lifetime nearly just to reach the nearest star. And that assumes we could actually build such a spacecraft, which would require thousands of nuclear bombs, which raises rather significant political and safety concerns. What about more exotic propulsion? Antimatter engines could theoretically achieve higher speeds, perhaps 20 to 30% of light speed. But antimatter is the most expensive substance in the universe. Current production costs are estimated at about $62 trillion per gram. To fuel an interstellar mission would require more antimatter than humanity has produced in its entire history, by many orders of magnitude. Fusion propulsion remains promising but perpetually out of reach. We have been 30 years away from practical fusion power for the past 60 years. The engineering challenges are immense, the temperatures required are stellar, the containment problems are unsolved. The speed of light itself represents an absolute limit. Nothing with mass can reach it, nothing with mass can exceed it. This is not a technological limitation that might be overcome with better engineering. It is a fundamental property of space-time itself, built into the structure of reality. Even if we could somehow accelerate a spacecraft to 90% of light speed, Alpha Centauri would still take nearly 5 years to reach from the perspective of observers on Earth. The time dilation effects of special relativity would compress the journey for the travelers, but that raises its own profound problems. Time dilation means that travelers moving at relativistic speeds experience time differently than those who remain behind. A crew traveling to a star 50 light years away at 90% of light speed might experience the journey as taking only about 20 years. But when they arrived, over 50 years would have passed on Earth. Everyone they knew would be old or dead. The civilization they left might have transformed beyond recognition. This is not a bug in the physics, it is how the universe works. The faster you travel through space, the slower you travel through time relative to those not moving. There is no way around it. There is no engineering solution. There is only the cold mathematics of Einstein's equations telling us that the universe does not care about our desire to explore it. Let me tell you about what happens to human bodies in space. Because even if we could solve the propulsion problem, we would still face the problem of keeping people alive. Space is not merely empty. It is lethal. In every way imaginable, and several ways you probably haven't imagined, space is trying to kill you. Radiation saturates the void between stars. Galactic cosmic rays, the debris of ancient supernovae, tear through everything in their path. These are not gentle particles. They are atomic nuclei stripped of their electrons, accelerated to nearly the speed of light by forces we don't fully understand, carrying enough energy to damage DNA, destroy electronics, and slowly poison any living thing exposed to them. On Earth, we are protected by the atmosphere and by the planet's magnetic field. In deep space, there is no protection. Every second, high-energy particles are passing through your body, leaving trails of ionization damage in their wake. Short-term exposure causes radiation sickness. Long-term exposure causes cancer. Chronic exposure over decades causes cumulative damage that we don't fully understand because no human has ever experienced it. How do you shield against galactic cosmic rays? Mass, lots of mass. Water, polyethylene, lead, anything dense enough to absorb the particles before they reach human tissue. But mass is the enemy of space travel. Every kilogram of shielding must be accelerated, which requires more fuel, which adds more mass. The trade-offs are brutal. Temperature presents another challenge. In the vacuum of space, there is no air to carry heat away from your body or to provide warmth. Objects in direct sunlight can reach hundreds of degrees Celsius. Objects in shadow can plunge to hundreds of degrees below zero. The temperature differential across a single spacecraft can be extreme, creating thermal stresses that can crack metal and shatter ceramics. Managing heat becomes critical. Spacecraft must radiate excess heat into space using large thermal panels. They must insulate against cold on the shadow side. They must account for the heat generated by electronics, by human metabolism, by every system that does work in the vacuum. Heat has nowhere to go except as infrared radiation, which is slow and inefficient. The vacuum itself is dangerous. Human bodies evolved in an atmosphere of approximately 100,000 pascals of pressure. In space, the pressure is effectively zero. Exposed to vacuum, the gases dissolved in your blood would bubble out, causing a condition called ebullism. Your lungs would rupture if you tried to hold your breath. Consciousness would fade within 15 seconds as oxygen in your blood was consumed. Death would follow in 1 to 2 minutes. Every moment in space, humans must be enclosed in a pressure vessel. Every vessel can leak, every seal can fail, every micrometeorite strike can puncture a hull. The engineering must be perfect, continuously, for decades or centuries in the case of interstellar travel. One mistake, one failure, one piece of space debris moving at kilometers per second, and everyone dies. This is not a frontier we can tame. This is an environment that will never stop trying to kill us. Let me tell you about time, because time is the enemy that no technology can defeat. We speak of interstellar travel as if it were simply a longer version of the voyages we know. A trip to Mars takes 7 months, a trip to Alpha Centauri takes longer. The same basic concept, just scaled up. This is a profound misunderstanding. The difference between 7 months and 7,000 years is not a difference of degree, it is a difference of kind. It transforms the entire nature of the enterprise. A 7-month journey can be planned by a single team. It can be funded by a single government or corporation. It can be crewed by individuals who expect to return home, to see their families, to resume their lives. The people who launch the mission will be alive to see it conclude. The technology that begins the journey will still be relevant when it ends. A journey of thousands of years is something else entirely. It spans generations, it spans civilizations. It requires us to think about human existence in ways we have never thought before. Consider what it would mean to build a spacecraft intended to travel for 6,000 years. The oldest human structures still standing are perhaps 5,000 years old. The Great Pyramid of Giza, Stonehenge, a handful of megalithic monuments. These are static objects made of stone, requiring no maintenance, performing no function except to exist. A spacecraft is not a monument. It is a machine of staggering complexity, with thousands of components that can fail, that require maintenance, that wear out and must be replaced. Life support systems, power generation, navigation, propulsion, computing, communication, every system must function continuously for millennia. No machine humanity has ever built has operated for 6,000 years. No machine has operated for 1,000 years. The longest operating human artifacts are simple devices like clocks, and even those require regular maintenance by skilled technicians. Who maintains a spacecraft for 6,000 years? Who trains the technicians? Who manufactures the spare parts? The answer, obviously, is that the passengers must do all of these things themselves. The spacecraft must be not just a vehicle, but a self-sustaining civilization, carrying within it all the knowledge and capabilities required to keep itself functioning indefinitely. This is the concept of a generation ship, a vessel large enough to support a permanent human population, designed to travel for centuries or millennia, with generations being born, living, and dying aboard the ship before it reaches its destination. The idea has a certain romance. A small society, isolated from Earth, traveling through the cosmic void toward a new home among the stars. Science fiction has explored the concept endlessly. It captures something deep in the human imagination, the dream of a fresh start, a new frontier, a chance to build civilization anew. The reality would be nightmarish. A generation ship would need to support a population large enough to maintain genetic diversity across centuries. We discussed this problem in the context of planetary colonies, but it becomes even more severe on a spacecraft. On a planet, at least, there is room to spread out. On a spacecraft, every cubic meter of volume must be justified. Every kilogram of mass must be launched from Earth at enormous cost. Estimates for minimum viable population on a generation ship range from several hundred to several thousand people, depending on assumptions about genetic management and breeding programs. Let us assume 1,000 people, which is probably optimistic. 1,000 people need food, water, air, and living space. They need medical care and education and governance. They need meaningful work and recreation and all the social structures that keep human communities functional. They need all of this not for a few years, but for millennia. The life support requirements are staggering. Each person needs roughly 840 grams of oxygen per day, about 3 liters of water, about 2,000 calories of food. Multiply by 1,000 people. Multiply by 365 days. Multiply by 6,000 years. You cannot carry these supplies from Earth. The mass would be impossible. You must recycle everything. Water must be purified and reused with near perfect efficiency. Air must be scrubbed of carbon dioxide and replenished with oxygen through biological or chemical processes. Food must be grown aboard the ship, which requires energy, space, and agricultural expertise. The closed-loop life support systems required for such a journey do not exist. We have experimental systems that can recycle water and air with perhaps 90% efficiency. For a journey of 6,000 years, you need essentially 100% efficiency. Any loss, however small, accumulates over millennia until the system fails. Biosphere 2, our most ambitious attempt at a closed ecosystem, could not support 8 people for 2 years. The oxygen dropped to dangerous levels. Crops failed. The system required outside intervention to prevent disaster. And this was on Earth, with unlimited energy, with gravity, with the ability to open a door and walk outside if things got bad enough. A generation ship offers no such safety net. If the agricultural system fails in year 2000, there is no resupply mission. If the oxygen recycling system degrades, there is no backup. If a disease sweeps through the population, there is no quarantine, no outside medical support, no evacuation. Every failure mode that could doom a planetary colony is magnified on a generation ship. The population is smaller, the environment more confined, the isolation more absolute. There is nowhere to go. There is no possibility of rescue. There is only the ship hurtling through the void, dependent on systems that must work perfectly for longer than any civilization has ever existed. Now let me tell you about psychology, because even if we could solve every technical problem, we would still face the problem of keeping people sane. Humans are not adapted for confinement. We evolved on the African savanna in open spaces, under wide skies. Our psychology expects variety, novelty, the possibility of movement and change. We need new faces, new places, new experiences to remain mentally healthy. What happens to people confined in small spaces for extended periods? We have data from submarines, from Antarctic research stations, from isolation experiments. The patterns are consistent and disturbing. Depression rates increase dramatically. Anxiety becomes endemic. Sleep disorders proliferate. Interpersonal conflicts escalate, often over trivial matters. As the pressure of confinement erodes social bonds, cognitive function declines, creativity diminishes, people become irritable, withdrawn, sometimes aggressive. These effects appear in groups isolated for months. Imagine generations. A generation ship would confine thousands of people in a space that, however large by spacecraft standards, would be microscopic by planetary standards. The same corridors, the same rooms, the same faces, the same recycled air and recycled water and recycled conversations, day after day, year after year, century after century. The first generation might cope. They would remember Earth. They would have chosen this life, accepted its constraints, committed to the mission. They would have purpose and meaning derived from being pioneers, the ones who started the great journey. But what about the second generation? The third? The 50th? These people would not have chosen this life. They would have been born into it. Prisoners of a decision made by ancestors, centuries dead. They would know Earth only as a fading legend, a place they could never see, a home they could never return to. Their entire existence would be bounded by the walls of a spacecraft, traveling toward a destination they would never reach. What gives such lives meaning? What sustains hope across generations that will never see the journey's end? Some have proposed that education could maintain purpose, teach each generation about the mission, about the destination, about their role in a great human endeavor, make them understand that their lives, however confined, serve a purpose larger than themselves. Perhaps this would work, or perhaps it would breed resentment. Why should I sacrifice my life for a destination I'll never see? Why should I follow rules made by people centuries dead? Why should I believe in a promised land that my great-great-grandchildren might reach? If everything goes perfectly, if nothing fails, if the calculations made by long-dead scientists were correct, religious communities have sometimes maintained coherent identities across many generations. But they have done so on Earth with access to resources, with the possibility of growth and change, with the option for dissatisfied members to leave. A generation ship offers none of these pressure valves. Every conflict must be resolved internally. Every dissident must be managed within the system. There is no outside. The governance challenges are immense. How do you maintain social order for 6,000 years? No political system in human history has lasted that long. Democracies rise and fall within centuries. Empires collapse. Revolutions transform societies beyond recognition. A generation ship would need governance structures capable of surviving millennia, flexible enough to adapt to changing circumstances, stable enough to maintain essential systems, legitimate enough to command obedience from people who never agreed to be governed. I do not believe such structures can be designed. We have no theoretical framework for creating institutions that function across such timescales. We barely understand how to create institutions that function across centuries. The challenge is not merely difficult. It may be impossible in principle. What happens when governance fails on a generation ship? When factions form and fight for control? When a group decides to seize the water recycling system or the food production facilities? When someone concludes that the mission is pointless and decides to end it? On Earth, political failures cause suffering and death, but humanity continues. Civilizations fall, others rise. The species survives its own mistakes. On a generation ship, political failure is extinction. One successful mutiny, one civil war, one catastrophic failure of social order, and everyone dies. 6,000 years provides many opportunities for such failures. Let me tell you about something called the weight calculation. because it reveals a paradox at the heart of interstellar ambition. Suppose we launch a generation ship today using the best technology available, traveling at perhaps 1% of the speed of light. It will arrive at Alpha Centauri in about 440 years. Now suppose that technological progress continues on Earth. In 50 years, we develop better propulsion, capable of 2% of light speed. In 100 years, 5%. In 200 years, perhaps 10%. A ship launched in 200 years at 10% of light speed would reach Alpha Centauri in about 44 years. It would arrive at the destination before the ship we launched today, despite leaving 2 centuries later. This is the weight calculation. It suggests that launching interstellar missions now may be futile because future technology will inevitably overtake current technology. No matter when you launch, a later mission with better technology will probably arrive first. The implication is troubling. It suggests that interstellar travel makes sense only when technology has plateaued, when further improvements in propulsion are unlikely. But we have no idea when that plateau might occur or whether it will occur at all. Perhaps the physics simply doesn't allow practical interstellar travel. Perhaps we are waiting for a breakthrough that will never come. And consider the psychological impact on a generation ship's crew. They launch, knowing they are embarking on a journey of thousands of years. Centuries later, they receive a transmission from Earth. A new ship has been launched, better technology, faster propulsion. It will arrive at the destination 500 years before them. The entire mission has become pointless. Everything their ancestors sacrificed, everything they have endured, rendered meaningless by technological progress they could not predict. Do they continue? Do they turn back? Do they simply give up? The weight calculation suggests that the rational strategy is to wait indefinitely, always hoping for better technology. But waiting indefinitely means never going at all. The stars remain forever out of reach, not because we can't travel to them, but because we're always waiting for a better way to travel. This is a trap with no obvious exit. Go now and be overtaken. Wait and never leave. The mathematics of technological progress conspire against the dream of interstellar expansion. Let me tell you about the destinations, because even if we could somehow cross the vast distances of interstellar space, we face a problem that is rarely discussed honestly. There may be nowhere to go. We imagine the galaxy filled with Earth-like worlds, blue and green orbs orbiting distant suns, waiting for human footsteps. Science fiction has trained us to expect planets with breathable atmospheres, drinkable water, fertile soil. We assume that the universe has prepared places for us. It has not. In the past 2 decades, we have discovered thousands of exoplanets orbiting other stars. This is one of the great scientific achievements of our time. Confirmation that planets are common throughout the galaxy, that our solar system is not unusual. But the details of these discoveries should temper our enthusiasm considerably. Most exoplanets are nothing like Earth. Gas giants like Jupiter and Saturn are common, but humans cannot live on a world with no solid surface, crushed by atmospheric pressures that would compress us into oblivion. Ice giants like Neptune abound, frozen wastelands of methane and ammonia. Hot Jupiters orbit so close to their stars that their atmospheres reach thousands of degrees. Rocky planets exist. We have found them. Some orbit within the habitable zones of their stars, the region where liquid water could theoretically exist on the surface. These discoveries generate headlines. Scientists speak excitedly about potentially Earth-like worlds, but potentially Earth-like is not Earth-like. The term means only that a planet is approximately the right size and approximately the right distance from its star for liquid water to be possible. It says nothing about whether water actually exists. It says nothing about atmosphere, magnetic field, geological activity, or any of the other factors that make Earth habitable. Consider what Earth actually offers. An oxygen-rich atmosphere maintained by billions of years of photosynthetic life, a magnetic field generated by a molten iron core shielding the surface from solar radiation, plate tectonics recycling carbon and regulating climate over geological timescales, liquid water covering 70% of the surface, a moon stabilizing the axial tilt and creating tides, a position in the solar system that avoided the heavy bombardment suffered by the inner planets. Each of these features is the product of specific circumstances, specific history, specific chance events. The probability that another planet would replicate all of them is essentially zero. Even planets that appear similar in size and orbital distance will differ in countless ways that matter for habitability. Mars is in the habitable zone of our own solar system. It has water ice, carbon dioxide, and sunlight. Yet Mars is utterly inhospitable to human life. Its atmosphere is 1% the density of Earth's. Its temperature averages minus 60 degrees Celsius. It has no magnetic field, no breathable air, no liquid water on the surface. A human on Mars without technological protection would die in minutes. Venus is almost exactly Earth's size and receives only slightly more solar energy, yet Venus has surface temperatures of 465 degrees Celsius and atmospheric pressure 90 times Earth's. Its clouds are sulfuric acid. Its surface has been described as the closest thing to hell in our solar system. These are planets in our own backyard, formed from the same primordial material as Earth. They are utterly unlike Earth. They remind us that planets in the habitable zone are not necessarily habitable. The exoplanets we have discovered around other stars are known to us only as shadows, as tiny dips in starlight or wobbles in stellar motion. We can estimate their size and orbital distance. We can sometimes infer something about their atmosphere by analyzing starlight filtered through it, but we cannot see their surfaces. We cannot know their geology, their chemistry, their history. When we speak of potentially habitable exoplanets, we are speculating based on minimal information. We are imagining Earth-like conditions based on Earth-like size and orbital position, while knowing that Mars and Venus demonstrate how misleading those criteria can be. Even if we found a truly Earth-like planet, consider what that would mean. It would have an atmosphere rich in oxygen, which means it would have life. Photosynthesis is the only known process that can maintain high oxygen levels over geological time. An oxygen atmosphere implies a biosphere, probably a complex one, possibly including organisms hostile to human biology. Would alien life be compatible with human life? Would alien microbes be benign or deadly? Would we be invasive species, disrupting ecosystems that evolved over billions of years? Would the native life be invasive to us, infiltrating our bodies, our habitats, our food supplies? We have no idea. We have exactly one data point about life in the universe, and that data point is Earth. Everything we know about biology comes from studying organisms that share a common ancestor, that use the same genetic code, that operate on the same fundamental biochemistry. Alien life could be utterly different in ways we cannot predict. The most optimistic scenario is that we find a rocky planet with liquid water, no dangerous life, and atmospheric conditions humans can survive in with minimal technological support. The probability of finding such a world within reach of any plausible spacecraft is effectively zero. The universe did not design worlds for human habitation. It designed them for no one. This means that any world we colonize will require terraforming or permanent technological support. We will not find Eden among the stars. We will find rocks and ice and poison atmospheres. We will find worlds that must be made habitable, if they can be made habitable at all. Terraforming is a concept beloved of science fiction. Transform Mars into Earth. Give it a thick atmosphere, liquid oceans, green forests. Make it a second home for humanity. The reality is rather more daunting. Mars lacks a magnetic field. Without one, the solar wind strips away any atmosphere we might create. We could pump gases into the Martian atmosphere for centuries, and the solar wind would gradually remove them. To terraform Mars permanently, we would need to restart its core, reigniting the dynamo that generates planetary magnetic fields. We have no idea how to do this. The energy requirements would be astronomical. It may be physically impossible. Venus presents different challenges. Its atmosphere contains far too much gas at far too high a temperature. To terraform Venus, we would need to remove most of its atmosphere, perhaps by converting carbon dioxide into solid carbonates, or by somehow launching it into space. The mass involved is staggering. The time scales would be measured in millennia or longer. These are the most hospitable planets in our own solar system, aside from Earth. Terraforming either one would be a project spanning thousands of years, requiring technologies we cannot currently imagine, with no guarantee of success. And these are our neighbors. Worlds we can reach in months. Worlds we have studied extensively. Imagine attempting to terraform a planet orbiting another star. A world we can barely see, that we know almost nothing about, that is decades or centuries of travel time away. How do you plan a terraforming project when you won't know the actual conditions until your colonists arrive? How do you carry the equipment for a centuries-long planetary engineering project across interstellar distances? The answer is that you don't. You can't. Terraforming exoplanets is not a plan. It is a fantasy. What remains is the alternative. Permanent technological habitation, living in sealed environments, dependent on life support systems, never breathing unprocessed air, never walking under an open sky, never touching the soil of a world that sustains you naturally. This is the actual future of space colonization, if it has any future at all. Not new Earths under alien suns, enclosed habitats, pressure domes, underground warrens. Artificial environments maintained indefinitely by machines that must never fail. We discuss the challenges of such habitats in the context of Mars. Those challenges multiply for worlds around other stars, worlds we cannot resupply from Earth, worlds separated from all support by years or decades of travel time, worlds where every component of every system must be manufactured locally or done without. Some have proposed that we abandon planets entirely. Why struggle with gravity wells and atmospheres when we could build habitats in space itself? O'Neill cylinders, vast rotating structures providing artificial gravity, powered by solar energy, constructed from asteroid materials. The concept has appeal. Space offers unlimited solar energy, unlimited raw materials in asteroids and comets, unlimited room to expand. A civilization of space habitats could grow indefinitely, unconstrained by planetary surfaces. But the engineering challenges are immense. A habitat large enough to support a meaningful population would need to be kilometers in scale. It would need to rotate to provide gravity, creating structural stresses that require materials beyond current capabilities. It would need radiation shielding measured in meters of mass. It would need closed-loop life support that works perfectly for centuries. And it would need to be built in space using space-based resources by workers operating in the most hostile environment imaginable. Every construction task that is routine on Earth becomes a life-threatening challenge in vacuum. Every tool, every technique, every safety protocol must be reinvented for weightlessness and radiation and extreme temperatures. We have built one large structure in space, the International Space Station. It took over a decade to construct, required dozens of launches, costs over $100 billion, and can support a crew of 6. It is magnificent, a genuine achievement of international cooperation and engineering skill. It is also utterly dependent on Earth. Food arrives regularly. Water arrives regularly. Spare parts and equipment arrive regularly. Crew members rotate every 6 months, returning to Earth for recovery. Without continuous support from Earth, the station would be uninhabitable within months. Scaling from the International Space Station to self-sufficient space habitats represents a leap of capability so vast that it defies comparison. We are not building towards such habitats. We are not developing the technologies that would make them possible. We are dreaming about them, writing stories about them, assuming that somehow, someday, someone will figure out how to make them real. This is the pattern of space colonization discourse. Assume that current problems will be solved by future technologies. Assume that physics will somehow be circumvented or transcended. Assume that the universe's hostility is a temporary obstacle rather than a permanent condition. These assumptions may be wrong. They may be fundamentally wrong. The challenges of space colonization may not be engineering problems awaiting better engineering. They may be limits built into the structure of reality itself. Let me tell you about something I call the Great Silence, because it bears on our prospects in ways we rarely consider. For decades, we have searched for signals from extraterrestrial civilizations. We have listened for radio transmissions, looked for laser pulses, scanned for any sign that intelligence exists elsewhere in the galaxy. We have found nothing. The universe is silent. This silence is strange. The galaxy is ancient, over 13 billion years old. Stars and planets formed billions of years before our solar system existed. If intelligent life arises with any regularity, civilizations could have emerged billions of years before us. They could have colonized the galaxy thousands of times over. Where are they? This question, known as the Fermi paradox, has many proposed answers. Perhaps intelligent life is rare. Perhaps civilizations destroy themselves before achieving interstellar capability. Perhaps they exist but are deliberately hiding. Perhaps they are so alien that we cannot recognize their signatures. But one answer deserves particular attention in this context. Perhaps interstellar colonization is simply impossible. Perhaps no civilization, no matter how advanced, can overcome the distances, the times, the energies, the biological constraints that separate stars. Perhaps every intelligent species that has ever existed has lived and died on its home world, never spreading beyond, never leaving a trace that could be detected across interstellar distances. If this is true, we are not merely facing difficult engineering challenges. We are facing the same walls that have contained every civilization before us. The same physics that limits us limited them. The same biology that constrains us constrained them. They were not stupid. They were not unambitious. They simply could not do what we assume we can do. The Great Silence suggests caution about our assumptions. It suggests that the universe may be structured in ways that prevent the spread of life between stars. It suggests that our dreams of galactic colonization may be not just difficult, but physically impossible. I do not know if this is true. No one knows. But the silence should give us pause. We are not the first to look at the stars and dream. Others may have dreamed before us, may have tried before us, may have failed before us. Their silence may be their answer. Let me tell you about biology, because biology may be the insurmountable barrier that all our engineering cannot overcome. We have discussed radiation, we have discussed gravity, we have discussed the psychological toll of confinement. But there is a deeper problem, one that goes to the very nature of what we are as living beings. We are not isolated organisms, we are ecosystems. And ecosystems cannot be transported across interstellar distances. Your body contains approximately 37 trillion human cells. It also contains roughly 38 trillion bacterial cells, primarily in your gut, but also on your skin, in your mouth, in every orifice and surface. These bacteria are not passengers. They are partners. They have co-evolved with humanity for millions of years. They perform functions that human cells cannot perform. Gut bacteria digest certain foods that human enzymes cannot break down. They synthesize vitamins that humans cannot produce, including vitamin K and several B vitamins. They regulate the immune system, training it to distinguish between threats and harmless substances. They influence brain function through the gut-brain axis, affecting mood, cognition, and behavior in ways we are only beginning to understand. Without these bacteria, you would die. Not eventually, quickly. Your immune system would malfunction. Your digestion would fail. Your brain would be deprived of essential signals. The symbiosis is not optional. It is fundamental to human existence. Now, consider what happens when you place this complex ecosystem in an artificial environment for thousands of years. The microbiome is not static. It changes constantly, influenced by diet, environment, stress, and interactions with other people. It evolves. Bacteria reproduce rapidly, generating millions of generations in a human lifetime. Over the course of an interstellar journey lasting millennia, the bacterial ecosystem within human bodies would undergo profound evolutionary change. What would it evolve into? We cannot know. Evolution is not directed. It responds to environmental pressures in ways that are impossible to predict. The bacteria that thrive in a spacecraft environment might be very different from the bacteria that thrive on Earth. They might be better at processing recycled food, or more tolerant of radiation, or more aggressive in competing for resources. Would these evolved bacteria still serve human needs? Would they still synthesize the vitamins we require? Would they still regulate our immune systems properly? Or would the symbiosis break down, leaving humans dependent on technological interventions to replace functions their ancestors performed naturally? We have no idea. We have never observed microbiome evolution over such timescales. We have never isolated a human population in an artificial environment for even a single century, let alone dozens or hundreds of centuries. This is not a problem that can be solved with probiotics or dietary supplements. The microbiome is not a list of species that can be maintained by periodic reintroduction. It is a complex, dynamic system with emergent properties that arise from interactions we do not fully understand. Maintaining it in a functioning state over millennia would require capabilities we do not possess and may never possess. And the microbiome is only one example of the biological systems that might degrade over interstellar timescales. Consider genetics. Human DNA is not perfectly copied when cells divide. Errors occur, roughly 100 new mutations per person per generation. Most of these mutations are neutral, neither helpful nor harmful. Some are harmful, a few are beneficial. Natural selection filters these mutations, favoring beneficial ones and eliminating harmful ones. But natural selection requires specific conditions to function effectively. It requires a population large enough for beneficial mutations to spread. It requires environmental pressures consistent enough to maintain selective force. It requires time for selection to operate across many generations. A generation ship would violate all of these conditions. The population would be small, perhaps too small, for selection to work efficiently. The environment would be artificial, creating selective pressures unlike anything in human evolutionary history. The timescales would be vast, allowing genetic drift, the random fluctuation of gene frequencies to dominate over selection. What happens to human genetics over 6,000 years in a small, isolated population under novel selective pressures? We have some hints from isolated human populations on Earth, island communities, mountain tribes, groups cut off from the main currents of human migration. These populations show elevated rates of genetic diseases, increased homozygosity, reduced genetic diversity, and they were isolated for only hundreds or thousands of years, not tens of thousands, and they maintained populations far larger than any spacecraft could support. A generation ship's population would be subject to intense genetic drift. Harmful mutations that would be eliminated in a large population might become fixed in a small one simply by chance. Genetic diversity would erode with each generation, reducing the population's ability to adapt to new challenges. The crew that arrived at the destination might be genetically compromised in ways that their ancestors who launched from Earth could never have predicted. We could attempt to counter this with genetic engineering. Screen embryos for harmful mutations, select for desirable traits, actively manage the human genome across generations. The ethical implications are staggering. We would be creating a society where reproduction is controlled by genetic algorithms, where human beings are bred like livestock for desired characteristics. The history of eugenics on Earth is ugly, filled with coercion, abuse, and murder. Would we repeat these crimes in the name of species survival? Would we create new crimes we cannot yet imagine? And even with genetic management, we would face the fundamental problem of inadequate knowledge. We do not understand human genetics well enough to predict the consequences of our interventions. Genes interact in complex ways. A mutation that is beneficial in one context may be harmful in another. The environment of a spacecraft differs so profoundly from Earth that traits selected for terrestrial success might be irrelevant or counterproductive in space. We would be flying blind, making decisions about human genetic destiny based on incomplete understanding, unable to correct our mistakes because the journey cannot be interrupted, unable to know whether our interventions are helping or harming until generations have passed. Let me tell you about another biological problem that is rarely discussed. Reproduction itself. Human reproduction is extraordinarily complex. It requires precise hormonal signaling, healthy gametes, successful fertilization, implantation, and 9 months of fetal development under specific conditions. Any disruption at any stage can result in infertility, miscarriage, or developmental abnormalities. We have limited data on human reproduction in space. No human has ever conceived in space. No pregnancy has ever occurred in microgravity. We have some animal studies, and they are concerning. Rodent experiments in space show developmental abnormalities, reduced fertility, and altered hormone levels. Fish embryos developed in microgravity show abnormal development of the vestibular system. The effects of radiation on gametes and developing fetuses are well documented and uniformly harmful. Would humans be able to reproduce successfully on a generation ship? Would pregnancies proceed normally in partial gravity or microgravity? Would fetuses develop correctly in elevated radiation environments? Would children born in space be healthy? We do not know. We have never tried. We are proposing to commit the future of human lineages to environments where reproduction might not work at all. If reproduction fails, the generation ship concept collapses entirely. There is no multi-generational journey if there are no new generations. The crew that launched from Earth would age and die, leaving a ghost ship drifting between stars. Its mission failed, its passengers extinct. Even if reproduction works, raising children in a spacecraft presents challenges we have never faced. Human development depends on environmental inputs. Children learn to walk by falling down and getting up. They learn social skills by interacting with diverse people. They develop cognitive abilities through exploration and play in varied environments. A spacecraft offers none of this diversity. Children would grow up in a confined, controlled, unchanging environment. They would never experience weather, never see a horizon, never encounter a stranger. Their social world would be limited to a few hundred people at most. Their physical world would be limited to corridors and modules they would know exhaustively before they could walk. What kind of humans would develop under such conditions? Would they be psychologically healthy? Would they be capable of the flexibility and creativity needed to deal with unexpected challenges? Would they be recognizable as human in any sense we would understand? We are not just proposing to transport human bodies across interstellar distances. We are proposing to transport human nature, human psychology, human society, human culture. All of these emerge from environments vastly richer and more varied than any spacecraft could provide. Remove the environment, and we do not know what remains. Let me tell you about what happens when systems interact, because the problems I have described do not exist in isolation. They compound. A spacecraft crew experiencing psychological stress would have compromised immune systems. Compromised immune systems would alter the microbiome. Altered microbiomes would affect mental health. Mental health problems would increase psychological stress. The cycle feeds on itself. Radiation damage would cause genetic mutations. Mutations would affect development. Developmental problems would strain medical resources. Strained resources would increase stress. Stress would further compromise immune function. More mutations, more problems, more strain. Genetic drift would reduce diversity. Reduced diversity would limit adaptive capacity. Limited adaptation would increase vulnerability to disease. Disease would reduce population. Reduced population would accelerate drift, each generation more vulnerable than the last. Small populations would limit social options. Limited options would increase conflict. Conflict would disrupt essential functions. Disrupted functions would reduce population. Smaller populations, fewer options, more conflict. These feedback loops are not speculative. They are how complex systems fail. One problem creates another. Solutions to one problem cause new problems elsewhere. The system degrades not through any single catastrophic failure, but through the accumulation of interacting stresses. A generation ship would be the most complex system humanity has ever created, operating under the most challenging conditions imaginable, for the longest duration ever attempted. Every system would be under stress. Every stress would interact with every other stress. The possibilities for cascading failure are endless. On Earth, complex systems fail all the time. Economies collapse, ecosystems degrade, societies disintegrate. We survive because Earth is forgiving. There is room to fail and recover. There are resources to draw upon. There are neighboring systems that can provide support. In interstellar space, there is no forgiveness. There is no recovery. There is no support. A generation ship that begins to fail will continue to fail until everyone aboard is dead. This is the reality that colonization advocates rarely confront. Not the possibility of failure, but its near certainty over sufficiently long timescales. Everything breaks eventually, everything degrades, everything fails. On Earth we rebuild, in interstellar space we die. I am not saying that human ingenuity cannot solve problems. We are remarkably good at solving problems. But we are good at solving problems in environments that provide feedback, that allow experimentation, that offer second chances. Interstellar space provides none of these things. We would have one chance to get everything right, one chance across thousands of years. One mistake in generation 47 and generations 48 through infinity never exist. The margin for error is not small. It is zero. Now let me tell you why, despite everything I have said, we must not abandon the dream. I have spent this entire discussion explaining why colonizing space may be impossible. The distances are incomprehensible. The energies required exceed anything we can produce. The timescales dwarf human civilization. The biology is wrong. The psychology is wrong. The economics don't work. The engineering challenges cascade into infinite complexity. Every system fails eventually, and in space, failure means death. I believe every word I have said. The obstacles are real. They are not engineering problems awaiting clever solutions. They are fundamental constraints built into the structure of reality itself. The universe is not designed for human expansion. It is not designed for anything. It simply is vast and cold and utterly indifferent to our dreams. And yet, I cannot accept that we are confined forever to this one world. I cannot accept that the entire future of consciousness in the universe is bounded by a thin layer of atmosphere around a small rocky planet orbiting an ordinary star. I cannot accept that everything we are, everything we might become, is destined to end here, whether in a century or a million years. This is not rational. Rationality would look at the obstacles I have described and conclude that interstellar colonization is not worth pursuing. The costs are too high. The risks are too great. The probability of success is too low. A rational species would focus on managing its home world sustainably, extending its survival as long as possible, accepting that the stars are forever beyond reach. But humans are not rational. We have never been rational. We have always reached for things beyond our grasp, climbed mountains that killed us, crossed oceans that drowned us, built civilizations that collapsed around us. We have always insisted on attempting the impossible, and occasionally, impossibly, we have succeeded. The first fish that crawled onto land was attempting the impossible. Life had existed in water for billions of years. Everything about that fish was optimized for water. Gills, fins, buoyancy, temperature regulation, all calibrated for an aquatic existence. Land was hostile, land was alien, land was impossible. And yet here we are, descendants of that impossible fish, walking on land, breathing air, living lives that would have been inconceivable to our marine ancestors. The impossible became possible because life refuses to accept limits. I do not know if we will ever colonize space. The obstacles may prove insurmountable. The distances may be forever unbridgeable. The universe may be structured to contain intelligence on single worlds, isolated islands of consciousness in an infinite dark sea. The great silence may be the universe's answer to every species that dreams of the stars. But I know that we must try. Not because success is guaranteed, not because the odds favor us, but because trying is what we are. It is the essence of humanity, the thing that distinguishes us from every other species we know of. We look at the impossible and ask, what if? What if we could fly? What if we could split the atom? What if we could walk on the moon? What if we could live among the stars? Every great achievement began with that question. Every expansion of human possibility started with someone looking at an insurmountable obstacle and refusing to accept that it was insurmountable. They were often wrong. They often failed. They often died. But sometimes, against all probability, they succeeded. And their successes changed everything. I want to be clear about what I am saying. I am not promising that we will colonize space. I am not predicting that technology will solve the problems I have described. I am not offering false hope that the stars are within our reach if we just try hard enough. I am saying something different. I am saying that the attempt matters even if it fails. The striving matters even if we never arrive. The dream matters even if it never comes true. Here is why. The challenges of space colonization are extreme versions of challenges we face on Earth. Life support systems that must function reliably for decades, we need those for sustainable cities. Closed-loop recycling of water and nutrients, we need that for environmental sustainability, radiation protection, we need that for workers in nuclear industries, for passengers on high-altitude flights, for patients receiving medical treatments, psychological resilience in confined spaces. We need that for submarines, for prisons, for nursing homes, for anyone living in conditions not of their choosing. Every technology developed for space has applications on Earth. Every solution to a space problem can be adapted to terrestrial problems. Every failure in space teaches us something about how complex systems fail, knowledge that makes our earthly systems more robust. The Apollo program cost roughly $150 billion in today's currency. It produced technological spin-offs that have returned that investment many times over. Memory foam, water purification systems, cordless tools, scratch-resistant lenses, medical imaging technologies, the list goes on and on. Technologies developed to keep astronauts alive for days found applications that improve millions of lives for decades. Now imagine the spin-offs from technologies developed to keep humans alive for centuries. The closed-loop life support systems, the radiation shielding, the psychological support tools, the genetic monitoring, the artificial ecosystems. Even if we never build a generation ship, the technologies developed in pursuit of that goal would transform life on Earth. This is the hidden value of impossible dreams. They drive innovation in ways that practical goals do not. A practical goal asks for incremental improvement. Build a rocket 5% more efficient. Extend spacecraft life by 10%. Reduce launch costs by 20%. These are worthwhile goals, but they do not revolutionize anything. An impossible goal demands revolution. It demands that we rethink fundamental assumptions. It demands breakthrough innovations that change what is possible. It asks not how can we do slightly better, but how can we do something entirely new. The pursuit of space colonization has already given us satellites that connect the world, weather forecasting that saves thousands of lives each year, GPS navigation that has transformed how we move through the world, an understanding of our planet's climate that may be essential to our survival. These came from the space program, from the decision to pursue goals that seemed impossible at the time. What might we gain from pursuing goals that seem even more impossible? I don't know. No one knows. That's the point. Revolutionary innovation is unpredictable by definition. We cannot know what we will discover until we begin the search. Let me tell you about something else that matters. Perspective. When the Apollo 8 astronauts became the first humans to orbit the moon, they took a photograph that changed how humanity sees itself Earthrise. Our planet, blue and white and impossibly beautiful, rising above the lunar horizon. A fragile marble in the infinite darkness. That image helped launch the environmental movement. It showed us our world as it truly is, a small, isolated, vulnerable oasis in the cosmic void. It made abstract concerns about pollution and sustainability concrete and visceral. We saw our home from the outside, and we understood, in a way we never had before, how precious it is. Every expansion of our presence in space has provided similar shifts in perspective. Photographs from the Voyager spacecraft showed our solar system in its entirety, Earth reduced to a pale blue dot, barely visible against the vastness of space. The Hubble Space Telescope has shown us galaxies billions of light years distant, each containing hundreds of billions of stars, each star potentially orbited by planets, the universe revealed as incomprehensibly vast and ancient. These perspectives matter. They change how we think about ourselves, about our problems, about our future. They make petty conflicts seem petty. They make existential challenges seem existential. They connect us to something larger than our daily concerns, something cosmic in scale and significance. A species that sees itself as confined to one planet thinks differently than a species that sees itself as potentially unbounded. Even if we never leave Earth in large numbers, the dream of leaving shapes our psychology, our culture, our sense of what is possible. It makes us larger in spirit, even if we remain small in physical extent. I do not want humanity to lose that dream. I do not want us to look at the stars and see only impossibility. I do not want our children and grandchildren and the generations beyond to accept that they are prisoners of one world, born into a cage from which there is no escape, even if the cage is real. The belief that it might be escaped matters. It preserves hope. It motivates effort. It keeps alive the possibility that we might be wrong about the limits we perceive. Let me tell you about the very long view. Human civilization is approximately 10,000 years old. Our species has existed for roughly 300,000 years. Life on Earth has existed for almost 4 billion years. The universe is 13.8 billion years old and will continue for trillions of years more. We are at the very beginning of time, cosmically speaking. If the universe were a calendar year with the Big Bang at midnight on January 1st, human civilization would have existed for approximately half a second before midnight on December 31st. We are newborns, taking our first breaths, just beginning to open our eyes. What might we become in 1,000,000 years? In 100 million? In 1 billion? The timescales are incomprehensible, but they are real. If humanity survives, if we do not destroy ourselves or succumb to natural catastrophe, we have almost unlimited time to develop. Technologies that seem impossible today might be routine in 1,000 years. Challenges that seem insurmountable might be solved in ways we cannot imagine. I am not predicting this. I am not promising it. I am simply observing that the future is very long and our current understanding is very limited. The obstacles I have described are real obstacles given our current capabilities. But our capabilities change. They have changed more in the past century than in the previous 1,000 centuries combined. There is no reason to assume they will stop changing. Perhaps we will never colonize space. Perhaps the obstacles truly are insurmountable, not just difficult, but impossible in principle. Perhaps consciousness is destined to remain confined to individual worlds, isolated points of light in an infinite darkness. Or perhaps we will find ways around the obstacles, ways we cannot currently imagine, using technologies we cannot currently conceive, achieving things that seem as impossible to us as a smartphone would seem to someone from ancient Rome. I do not know which future awaits us. Neither does anyone else. The honest answer to the question of whether humans can colonize space is that we don't know. We won't know until we try, fail, learn, and try again, perhaps for centuries or millennia. The only thing I know for certain is that giving up guarantees failure. Surrendering to impossibility makes impossibility real. Accepting limits ensures that those limits remain. I refuse to accept. I refuse to surrender. Not because I am certain of success, but because the attempt itself has value, because the dream itself has value, because humanity without impossible dreams is humanity diminished. The universe is vast and cold and indifferent. It offers us nothing. It promises us nothing. It cares nothing for our survival or our aspirations. But we care. We care about survival. We care about the future. We care about the countless generations who might exist if we make the right choices, who will never exist if we make the wrong ones. We care about the stars. That caring is precious. It is rare, perhaps unique in the entire cosmos. We have no evidence that any other species has ever looked at the night sky and dreamed of traveling there. We may be the first. We may be the only. And so I say, let us try. Let us fail. Let us learn. Let us try again. Let us keep trying for as long as our species endures. Because the attempt matters. Because the dream matters. Because we are human, and humans do not accept limits. The stars are waiting. They have been waiting for 13 billion years. Perhaps they will wait forever. Perhaps no one will ever reach them. Or perhaps, against all odds, we will. I do not know. But I will not stop hoping. I will not stop dreaming. I will not stop believing that somewhere in that vast darkness there is a future for humanity among the stars. Because if we stop believing, that future becomes impossible. And I am not ready to accept impossible. Not yet, not ever,